Hey guys, welcome back to Another World Audiobooks. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited for you to listen to this chapter. I'm actually a little jealous of you because I've already read it and I don't get to experience it for the first time, but you, right now, get to experience this for the first time. Oh my goodness, this chapter really pays off. There are some twists that I did not see coming. It's pretty crazy. So, I've just for different voice acting stuff, I've had to look ahead, and so I thought I'd used up all the spoilers, but I hadn't. There was still still surprises to come, and I did not expect that. So this book really pays off, and I'm super excited for you guys to enjoy this next chapter. If you are enjoying this book, please let me know. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to see some reviews. It always just makes it more of a conversation and way more enjoyable to hear from listeners like that. So please get in touch. AnotherWorldAudiobooks.com is where all the links for getting in touch and leaving reviews and doing all this stuff are, as well as becoming a patron. So thanks to our patrons for making this episode possible. If you are not a patron, you should thank the patrons because they are helping make this podcast possible. So thank you, patrons, and thank you for future patrons as well who are going to sign up to help us keep this on the air and bring the last chapter, which is coming next week. So make sure to tune in for that. And don't forget, I want to hear from you. What book do you want to hear next? Get in touch, and looking forward to hearing from you. All right, guys, without further ado, I give you the best so far chapter of Meet the Tiger. Chapter 19. The Tiger. Precisely 3 minutes later, Simon Templar and Oris were led into the saloon under an armed guard. "Good evening, dear Bittlekins," murmured the saint affably. "Fancy meeting you," as the vicar said when he saw one of the leading lights of the Parish Mothers' Union dancing at the 43. "Sit down and tell me all the news." Bittle smiled.
"We all make slips," he said, "but I scarcely imagined you would overlook such an obvious factor as Miss Home."
"I was just hoping that you yourself might overlook it," explained the saint. "I honestly thought you were slow enough on the uptake for that. Still, we all make our mistakes, as the bishop said, even the very youngest and most inexperienced of us, and very few mistakes are irreparable." Bittle nodded slowly.
"Very few,"
he agreed.
"I made a bad one when I presumed your death, but, as you see, that error has been rectified. Even now, Templar, you are a dead man."
The saint let his gaze travel round the saloon. "Quite comfortable," he admitted, "but I really thought heaven would be a bit more luxurious. Besides," he surveyed the 6 tough customers who had ranged themselves round him in a semicircle that fairly bristled with knives and revolvers. "These don't look like angels, and you don't either, my pet, if it comes to that. Do you think I could have missed the bus and arrived in hell by mistake?" His sodden trousers were shapeless, and the white of his torn shirt was marked with grease. But still, by the exercise of his inimitable gift, he was able to look debonair and immaculate. And, for all the apparently overwhelming odds against him, he retained his air of unshakable confidence. But this time, Bittle could see no loophole in the trap in which he had the saint, and he refused to be awed by anything so intangible as the saint's assured bearing.
"Have they been searched?"
he asked one of the guard, but it was Simon who answered. "I gave up my gun when I surrendered."
"And kept your knife. I remember that trick,"
said Bittle. He himself removed Anna, and by making a thorough examination, he found also her twin sister strapped to the saint's leg. The discovery pleased him.
"I'm not making any more mistakes, Templar."
"So glad," drawled Simon. "May I have my cigarette case back, please? Anna and Belle aren't any use to anyone but myself, but the cigarette case is really silver. I won it in the Open Ludo tournament at Bournemouth in 13. Bittle examined the case, and, failing to find anything suspicious about it, returned it to the saint, who replaced it in his hip pocket. The saint turned suddenly on his heel, and the guards sprang back a pace and put up their weapons. And Simon laughed. "Your men aren't very brave, are they?" he remarked. "I'm unarmed, and each of them looks like a traveling arsenal. But watch!" He feinted at one of the tough-looking customers, and the man flinched away. The saint tweaked his nose urgently, and, wheeling round, tripped up another man and sent him crashing to the floor. Bittle sprang up with an oath, reaching for his revolver, but the saint turned back with a light chuckle and put up his hands. Merely a demonstration of moral superiority, he said airily. Even now, you see, I can scare you.
Well, soon stop that,
Biddle grated, furious at having let himself be alarmed by the exhibition, and pointed to one of the men.
Fetch a rope. We'll see what he can do when he's trussed up.
Anything you like, said the saint boastfully. Houdini is my middle name, and knots mean nothing to me. The rope was brought, and Simon's hands were tied securely behind his back. The man knew his job, and since he was the gentleman whose nose the saint had taken liberties with, he did not consider the prisoner's comfort at all. The cords bit savagely into Simon's wrists, tightened up by a violent hand, but the saint only smiled. "Mind you don't break the rope," he said solicitously. The man knelt down to bind the saint's ankles, but the saint, without any haste or heat, put his foot in the man's face and pushed him over. "If there's no objection," he murmured, "I'll sit down first." He crossed the saloon nonchalantly and took one of the swivel chairs. Then he let the seaman tie his ankles together. The same brutal force was exerted there, and when the operation was complete, the man straightened and deliberately struck Simon on the mouth. The saint did not move, and the man spat in his face. "I congratulate you," said the saint in a low voice. "You are the first man who has ever done that to me, and I am pleased to think that before morning you will make the 13th man I have killed."
"That'll do,"
rapped Biddle, as the man raised his fist again.
"Tie up his servant."
Oris clenched his hands and looked round belligerently.
"Come and have a try,"
he challenged. Oris was game enough, but there were men all round him, and he could only knock 2 of them flying before the rest were clinging to his arms and legs and bearing him, still struggling and swearing sulphurously, to the floor. He was trussed up even more comprehensively than the saint, perhaps because his cruder form of defiance was more understandable to the inferior mentalities of the guard. And then one of the men was sent to bring in the girl, and Simon braced himself up for the meeting. Patricia walked into the saloon with her head held high, but her calm was not proof against the sight of the saint's bruised face and the thin trickle of blood running down his chin from the corner of his mouth. "Simon!" she sobbed, and would have run to him, but 2 of the guard clutched at her and dragged her back against the wall. "It's all right, old darling," said the saint urgently. "Don't let the swine see you break down. I'm not hurt. Just been in a vulgar brawl, and it's nothing to what the blister will look like when I've finished with him. Now, Pat, old thing, cast an eye over that nasty object across the way. It's old fat Biddle himself, and he's going to make a speech about his triumph. I can see it written all over the boils he calls his face." Biddle nodded.
"I must confess," he said, "that I have some cause to be satisfied with the conclusion of our little rivalry."
"Conclusion, my sock suspenders!" snorted the saint. "I haven't started yet."
"In that case, Templar, you would appear to have sacrificed your chance forever. But your diagnosis, in a way, was quite correct. I was about to outline to you the program which I propose to follow with regard to your immediate future."
"Careers for our boys," quoth Simon irreverently. Biddle clasped his hands across his stomach.
"Before we proceed with that interesting exposition, however," he said, "I think there are 2 members of the company who would like to be present."
He turned to one of the guard.
"Lambert, will you go and see if Mr. Broom and Mr. Maggs have recovered sufficiently to join us?"
The man left the saloon, and there was silence for a moment. Presently, Biddle said,
"While we're waiting, perhaps you'd care to tell me how you managed to escape?"
The saint grinned. "Nothing is easier. When I was an infant, a celebrated clairvoyant and card sharper told me that I had been born under the sign of the zodiac, known to astronomers as Humpty Dumpty, and to the lay public as the Egg. Taking his words to heart, I early applied myself to the study of the science of levitation, in the hope of averting the doom which had been prophesied for me. I succeeded so well, by virtue of years of practice and self-denial and hours of fasting and prayer, that I can now back myself to bounce to almost unlimited heights. Consequently, when I fell into your little trap, I was able to fall out again, if you get the idea. I think that's the whole story, except that an aunt of mine once had an undergardener whose nephew knew a man whose father had once shaken hands with a lady who remembered meeting a dentist in Maida Vale, whose second cousin twice removed was the divorced wife of a Manchester stockbroker who once ate a pint of whelks with a lawnmower on Wigan Pier for a bet. In fact, went on Simon, warming to his subject, we are a very distinguished family. Another aunt of mine had gout, and a mother-in-law whose cook married a gas-fitter who—
"Spare us your humour,"
pleaded Bittle wearily.
"It doesn't amuse me."
"But it amuses me, as the actress said on an auspicious occasion," said the saint, and would have continued in that vein if Bloom and Maggs had not arrived at that moment. Both looked much worse for the wear, and their heads bore abundant tokens of the cold water which had been liberally used in resuscitating them. In addition, Bloom's forehead was disfigured by a bruise, which was rapidly taking to itself all the brighter hues of the rainbow, and the way he glared at the saint was not friendly. "The compliments of the season, mynheer," drawled Simon. "And who's the other little ray of sunshine, Mr. Chairman?"
"Our captain, Mr. Maggs."
Bittle introduced that injured warrior suavely.
"You have not met him before, Templar, but our dear friend Miss Home knocked him out an hour or two ago."
"Delighted," murmured the saint. "She seems to have made a good job of it, Maggie. Or did you always look like that?" Mr. Maggs lowered.
"My name's Maggs," he blustered.
"But I shall call you Maggie," insisted the saint. "It's more matey, and it suits you better. And really, I didn't mean to be rude about your face. You've got a nice kind of face, like a cow." Mr. Maggs turned away with a growl and stalked over to the girl. Then the saint was afraid, and the veins stood out purply on his forehead as he wrestled with his bonds. Maggs took the girl's chin in his thick fingers and tilted up her face, leering down at her.
"You might have killed me," he said, "hitting me like that, but I'll make you apologize later, and I like my apologies sweet." "Sit down, Maggs," snapped Bittle.
Maggs still persisted.
"Give us a kiss to be getting on with, like a good girl." "Sit down, Maggs."
Bittle was on his feet, and there was death in his hand. Grumbling, Mr. Maggs lurched into a chair and sat staring at Patricia in his ugly way. Bloom went round to the chair opposite Maggs, but Bittle remained standing at one end of the table. The saint sat at the other end. Bittle paused for a moment, and the men grouped round the walls fidgeted into stillness. A macabre atmosphere of fiendish cold-bloodedness began to fill the room. It came from the hate-smouldering eyes of all those silent men, and it clouded malevolently behind the stocky figure of John Bittle. Bittle was posing at the end of the table, waiting for the theatrical effect of the gathering to tense up to a nerve-tearing pitch, and a sensitive man could have felt the silence keying up to the point at which unreasoning terror clouds like a foul vapor. Seconds throbbed away in that pulsating suspense. The saint cleared his throat. "Ahem, rising to address this general meeting at the close of such a successful year," he prompted. "I feel— Go on, Bittle, declare the dividend, and make sure all your braces' buttons are safe before you bow to the applause." His gently mocking tones broke down some of the tension. He looked across at the girl, and she smiled back. "I'm not taking any notice," she said in a clear voice. "He's only indulging his love for melodrama."
"Melodrama,"
replied Bittle,
"is a thing for which I have an instinctive loathing. Yet, in a situation such as this, it is very hard to avoid overstepping the bounds of banality. However, I will try to be as precise and to the point as possible."
He fixed his malignant gaze on the saint.
"This man, Templar, whom you see, has elected to interfere in matters which do not concern him. By a succession of miracles, he has so far managed to avoid the various arrangements which we have made for disposing of him. But now, on the open sea, I hardly think he can escape. He has put us to great inconvenience, and I don't think anyone here has any cause to bear him any goodwill. While he lives, no one here is safe, I believe I am merely the spokesman of everyone present when I say that he must die."
He looked from face to face, and there was a mutter of assent. He looked at the saint again.
"I endorse that verdict,"
he said. "Black as skite and brick dust," said the saint disparagingly. Bittle continued.
"Then there is this man, Oris. He is also a man against whom some of you will bear a personal grudge. In any case, he is in Templar's confidence, and therefore I say that he too must die."
"Pure banana oil," jeered the saint.
"Finally," said Bittle, "there is the girl. I propose to marry her myself, and Mags will conduct the service as soon as the sentence has been carried out upon Templar and Oris."
He picked up a revolver from the table and waved it meaningly.
"If there is anyone here, Mags included, who objects to that, he can speak now."
Nobody moved. "Scat!" remarked the saint.
"Is that all the protest even our redoubtable Mr. Templar can make?"
Bittle sneered.
"I'm disappointed. You've talked so much about what you were going to do to all of us that I was expecting something interesting."
Simon yawned. "Oh, before I die," he said, "may I tell you my celebrated joke about a man called Khan? I wonder if you've heard it before. There was once a physician called Khan, but nobody cared with a darn. If a man said, 'By heck, that bloke might be a tech,' the other would simply say, 'Gone.' And yet it happens to be true. Isn't it odd?"
"Patricia,"
Bittle rolled the name out with relish,
"has already told me that story. If it is of any comfort to you, I can assure you that it will only make me more careful of her health. The same ultimatum which brought you into my power will, I think, discourage Khan. It will certainly be an awkward dilemma for him, but I imagine that his humanity will triumph over his sense of duty."
"If that is so," said Simon slowly, "I think he will be sure to give the order to fire, and blow this ship and everyone on board to smithereens." Bittle shrugged and signed to one of the men whom Oris had floored.
"We will start with the servant,"
he said.
"Here,"
jibed Oris.
"You're a lot of thundering heroes, you are. Undo me hands and come out on the deck, any six of you, and I'll show you what a roughhouse feels like."
Beads of perspiration broke out on the man's face as he slowly raised the revolver.
"It's all right, sir,"
Oris ground out.
"Don't think I care at all for what these bleeding cows do. Shoot, you maggot. What you scared of? Afraid I'll bite you? Get on with it, and be blasted to you."
"Wait." The saint's mildest voice scarcely masked the whiplash crack of his command, and the man lowered his gun. Bittle turned to him.
"Have you, after all, something to say before the sentence is carried out?"
he inquired ironically.
"Perhaps you would like to go down on your knees and beg me to spare you. Your prayers will not move me, but the spectacle of Mr. Templar grovelling at my feet would entertain me vastly."
"Not this journey," said the saint. Already he had worked the cigarette case from his pocket and cut through the cords which had bound his hands, though it had been a long and difficult feat. Now he had slid forward in the chair and tucked his legs well back, and he was patiently sawing away at the ropes which pinioned his ankles. "You see," said the saint in the same leisured tone, "we are all, as you recently observed, liable to make our mistakes, and you have made 3 very big ones. You must understand, my seraph, that your own loathing for melodrama is only equalled by my love for it, and I think I can say that I staged this little conversazione simply for my own diversion. It seemed to me that this adventure ought to finish off in a worthily dramatic manner, and if all goes well, you'll have to bear the agony of watching enough melodrama concentrated into the next few minutes to fill a book. Things from approximately now onwards will go with a kick strong enough to set the Lyceum gasping. How does that appeal to you, beloved?"
"I'll tell you when I hear," said Bittle brusquely,
but the saint declined to be hurried. "The speechifying," he remarked, "will now come from the principal shareholder, so please don't fluster me. Sit down and listen. You've had your turn. Well, here we all are, just like a happy family, and exactly where I wanted you all. I grant you I took a big risk, but I had to do it to get the scene nicely set and the audience all worked up and palpitating in their pews. Also, it happened to be necessary to pass a little time before the moment was ripe for trotting out the big thrill. Now, if you're ready, I'll send up the first balloon." The saint paused and smiled from Bloom to Bittle. Where is Harry the Duke? If he had detonated a charge of thermite under their feet, he could not have produced a greater sensation. The men looked from one to another, suspicion and rage and fear chasing over their faces deliriously. For a space there was an electric silence, while the saint leaned back in his chair, smiling beatifically, and felt the last strand of rope break away from his ankles. Then the storm broke loose. Bittle reached forward and pawed at Bloom's shoulder frenziedly.
"What's happened to Harry?"
he snarled. Bloom jumped to his feet and struck down Bittle's hand.
"Leave me alone."
Bloom's nerves were raw and jagged.
"It isn't my fault. You never asked me, and you've been too busy talking yourself for me to tell you."
He glared round at the saint.
"That meddling puppy got me. I was just taking Harry some food. The door was open, and he got me. I knew he'd found Harry."
Bittle sprang at the boar like a wild beast, his face contorted with demoniac fury, and Bloom reeled back from a vicious blow. In an instant, Bittle had grabbed a couple of revolvers, and was holding them threateningly in his quivering hands, and Bloom cowered sullenly back from the flaming passion that blazed in Bittle's eyes. Bittle, in that towering paroxysm, would have murdered the other where he stood, given the slightest provocation, and the boar knew it.
"Search the ship!"
Bittle shrilled.
"You, all of you, get out and search the ship!"
"Why bother?" asked the saint in his silkiest manner. "If you want to find Harry the Duke, my little ones, you'll have to go all the way back to Bakem." Bittle swung round.
"Meaning?"
he prompted dangerously. "Meaning that when I dented old Bloom's cranium, I went into the cabin and found Harry the Duke, alias Agatha Girton," said Simon. "We had quite a long chat. He told me how Agatha died years and years ago at Yare, and Harry took her place. The tiger found him out, and that was another bad bloomer. You'd have thought any sane man would have been satisfied with a cool $1,000,000. But no, the tiger was so greedy he had to blackmail Harry for Miss Holmes' money, and that made Harry sore. Harry's a dangerous man when he's sore, and he tried to kill the tiger. Then the tiger saw what a mug he'd been, and decided to take Harry off on the cruise, and dump him over the side with a couple of fire bars spliced to his feet, which is a very effective way of killing a man, and has the advantage that it leaves no incriminating corpses about. Harry was able to tell me quite a lot of interesting things about tigers, and tiger cubs. Then I told him a few things he didn't know, and after that we shook hands. He was really a sportsman, because he did try to put the kibosh on your hanky-panky with Miss Home, whom he was rather fond of, and I let him slip over the side and swim back to Bakem on condition he wrote an anonymous letter to Khan telling him all those things about tigers and tiger cubs which we'd discussed. The saint looked almost apologetic. "And therefore, one and only, thank God, Bittle, I can assure you that the police will come aboard with the pilot if you so much as show the tip of your bowsprit outside Cape Town Harbour, and the mounted will be camped all round T.T. Deeps in case you manage to sneak in by the back way. Rather upsetting, isn't it?"
"You, at least, will not laugh much longer,"
said Bittle, and put the muzzle of one of his revolvers in the saint's face.
"Half a sec!"
Simon's voice ripped out like a gunshot, and Bittle hesitated with his finger tightening on the trigger. "While I'm being so communicative, you might as well hear the rest of the yarn. It may help you, though I doubt it. Let me tell you your second mistake. I've got another stiff one ready to shoot at you. This is mostly Oris's story, but he won't mind my cribbing it. Oris, you know, hasn't been wasting his time. Oris went below and laid out your engineer and put on his clothes. You spoke to him yourself, and never guessed. I'll bet that makes you hop. Then I arrived, and also mistook Oris for the genuine article, and I nearly killed him before I found out my error. Oris and I knew enough about motors to obey the telegraph, and it was us what took this here bateau out for you. After we'd finished, I made Oris take off the overalls so that you wouldn't suspect anything. But the real engineer is still locked up below, and he must be pretty cramped and peevish by this time. But that's not the whole yarn, not by a mile. Bittle had lowered his gun as the Saint talked on, for it was dawning upon Bittle that the Saint had an even bigger trump card yet to play. Prince of bluffers though the Saint might be, Bittle could not believe that he could bluff for his life in such a casual manner. The Saint smiled all the time, and he was smiling in such a way as almost to invite the others to doubt his word, yet every now and then he handed them out one perfect gem of verifiable fact to shatter their illusions and force them back to credulity. He used his facts as pegs on which to hang the decorations with which his egotism compelled him to embellish the tale. But for all that, those facts stuck out as stark and uncontrovertible as a forest of spears. And all the time, Bittle could sense that the Saint, in his mild and lingering way, was working up to an even more devastating bombshell. What that bombshell was going to be, Bittle could not divine, but the conviction was borne in upon him that a mine of some sort was going to be exploded somewhere in his vicinity, and therefore he waited for the Saint to have his say, for he was going to minimize his danger by letting the Saint forearm him against it. Simon was gazing through a portal at the dark horizon, and something that he saw there seemed to please him. His smile trembled on the verge of laughter, as at some secret jest, and when he went on, there was a trace of excitement creeping into his voice. "Oris and I," said the Saint, "have brains, and Oris used to be a sergeant of Marines, so he was able to provide the raw material for our ingenuity to work on. Before we started the picnic, we put your bilge pump out of action and opened up one of the scuttles in the keel. My nautical knowledge is very scanty, and I'm not sure if that's the way a sailor would describe the gadgets, but I expect Maggie will tell you what I mean. Anyway, a lot of water started pouring in, and we legged it out of the way without waiting to see what happened next. Still, I noticed that we seem to have lost a lot of speed, and unless my eyes are failing, I should say that we had developed what I understand is called a list to starboard. So I suppose the old tub really is going down. Check me up if I'm wrong." Mags started up, and the others looked wildly about them. The Saint had spoken the truth. The list had developed very slowly at first, so that no one had noticed it in their absorption in more tempestuous things. But now that the Saint had called their attention to it, the fact was indisputable. Suddenly, there was a stampede for the door. Bittle leapt forward, raving like a maniac, and quelled the panic. He fought in between the terrified mob and the door, and held them off at revolver point. Then he himself opened the door and looked out. The ship had lost way considerably, and was now heeling over so much that it was difficult to walk on the sloping decks. Bloom was swaying drunkenly towards the door.
"The gold!" he blubbered. "The gold! It'll sink! Bittle, make them get the gold into the boats!" "You're a fool!"
Bittle pushed the man back. He was easily the calmest of them all. His rage had simmered down now, out of visibility, but it gleamed behind his small, pale blue eyes like the molten lava which oozes down the sides of a volcano when the eruption has died down. Both his guns went up.
"You beat me in the end, Templar!" he shouted. "But I can see that you never enjoy it."
Like one possessed, he kicked aside a man who stood in his line of fire.
"Laugh now, Templar," he babbled. "It's your last laugh."
And the Saint chuckled, throwing back his head joyously, for he had seen the final shock which he had allowed for dovetail in according to the schedule. "Put up your hands, Bittle!" The voice cracked into the room like a bad saber. Bittle turned and saw the man who had appeared in the doorway, and his revolvers thudded to the carpet from his nerveless fingers. He shrank away into the farthest corner, and his face had gone grey and horrible. Algy took a step into the room, a heavy automatic in each hand, and the men retreated before him. He swept them with hard, merciless eyes. I think you all know me, said Mr. Lomas Cooper in the same metallic voice. He looked at the girl and read bewilderment in her face. I am the tiger, said Algie. Whoa. Okay. I want to hear, honestly, like, did you see that coming? I did not see that coming. So a couple chapters ago when there was like the radio call and that Karn listened into, I had to look it up and figure out who the tiger was, because I wanted to do the voice in a way that didn't quite give it away, but wasn't too ridiculously different from who the tiger was going to end up being, and I didn't know, so I had to look it up. But I didn't get the Agatha Girton / Harry the Duke switch there. That was quite the twist. So anyway, I love this chapter. That was a lot of fun. Hope you guys are enjoying it. One thing I'm gonna be trying to do is actually grab like a video of me doing all the different voices. I think that'd be kind of fun to put that on social media. So if you aren't following Another World Audiobooks on social media, you definitely do that, so that you can get all of that extra little bonus content that's going to be coming out. So make sure to check that out. Again, that's anotherworldaudiobooks.com for all the links. All right, vocabulary corner. I actually missed a couple of these from last week, so these won't necessarily all apply to chapter 19. Some are from chapter 18, actually, or maybe 17. I'm trying to remember. I got all mixed up here. Anyway, we'll just run through them here. Let's see. Bateau is a long, light, flat-bottomed boat with a sharply pointed bow and stern. Bateau. So that's a cool one. Let's see, we'll just jump right through them here. What was the next one? Lyceum. Lyceum is a hall in which public lectures, concerts, and similar programs are presented. I'm pretty sure I'd heard that word before, but I never knew what it meant. So, Lyceum. There you go. All right, and then this was a fun one. Conversazioni. It's a social gathering predominantly held by a learned or art society for conversation and discussion, especially about arts, literature, medicine, and science. So I guess it's kind of like the Italian version of a salon, I guess you would say. Conversazioni. Yeah, I would love to have a conversazione or attend a conversazione. I would love to be in on a conversazione someday. That would be cool. Redoubtable. I've heard that one before, and it's just one of those words that you kind of hear and you kind of get what it means, but I wasn't 100% sure on the definition or how to pronounce it. So redoubtable means arousing fear or awe. It's formidable. So it's a redoubtable foe. All right. Burberry. I couldn't quite find, there wasn't a definition, because it's another one of those brands that's still around. Like, you can go to Burberry.com and you can purchase clothing and scarves and all kinds of stuff. So I'm assuming it was like a bathrobe type of thing. The book said that Pat found a Burberry laying across the chair, so she put that on. So I'm assuming it's like some kind of bathrobe or robe or coat or jacket or something like that. So Burberry, another clothing brand that's still in business. That is so crazy after 100 years or whatever it's been. And then Regatta, that's another good one. I think this was from a past chapter, but there's a rowing speedboat or sailing race, or a series of such races. So if you're having a boat race, you could call it a regatta. That's kind of a cool word. And then this was some more slang that I thought was funny. Scooped the pool. It's basically an informal phrase that means to win all the prizes or money in a competition, such as a casino game or a trivia night. Basically, you're achieving significant victory in a contest. So if you win all the prizes, you have scooped the pool. That's a good one. All right, and then inimitable is defying imitation or matchless. That's one, again, I've heard it before, but I couldn't have told you what it meant, and I would probably have mispronounced it. So, there we go. Inimitable, there we go. Inimitable means matchless. And then the final one, I actually kind of want to buy this. It's called Ludo. It's a strategy-based board game for 2 players in which the players race their 4 tokens from start to finish according to the rolls of a single die. It actually, if you look it up, Ludo, the game, it looks a lot like Sorry. So, because Simon said something about how he'd won his cigarette case in a Ludo tournament, which is pretty hilarious. So. Anyway, that's Simon Templar Wit coming out there. All right, there we go. Long vocabulary corner because I had to catch up, but hope you guys enjoy that. I'd love to hear from you. Please get in touch. Again, that's anotherworldaudiobooks.com. Do my best to make this podcast the best that it can be, and I want to hear from you. If you have any suggestions or criticisms, whatever, I'd love to hear from you. Please get in touch, and thank you for sharing the podcast, telling other people about the show. That just is so helpful and really helps just grow the show and help us to continue to reach more people. So thanks, guys, for listening, and we'll catch you next week for the last chapter of Meet the Tiger. It's going to be a good one.